Welcome, Mr. Tugushi. First of all, we would like to thank you for accepting our request. It's an honor and pleasure to meet you and do an interview with you. We have some questions about CPT that we are curious to know your answers. But before going deep into those questions, could you please introduce yourself? And then could you enlighten us about how you started working as a CPT member?
Okay, first of all, thanks for the invitation, and it's my great pleasure to have this discussion with you today. About myself, I am a human rights lawyer by education, and in the course of the last 20 years, I've been working more or less in the area of law and human rights. I served as Ombudsman of Georgia, Human Rights Ombudsman, also Minister for the Prisons. Also, I work more or less full-time with the Council of Europe as a consultant. Back in 2010-2015, I was Vice Chair of the United Nations Committee Against Torture and member. Also the rapporteur on reprisals of the committee. And as of 2005, I served 3 consecutive mandates as a member of the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture, the CPT. It's in total 12 years, 3 4-year mandates, and more is not allowed. And also I served as the member of the ECRI, which is European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance. Currently, I am member of the Parliament of Georgia, deputy head of the Human Rights Committee, but I also do a lot of consultancy work, including acting as an expert for the lawyers in United Kingdom, mostly in the extradition cases related to the extradition of the requested persons from UK to other states. Other than that, I am involved in numerous projects, including one very interesting project in Turkey, which is the civil monitoring boards, the bodies which are authorized to visit the prisons and penitentiary institutions, prisons and detention houses, and monitor human rights inside this institution. Also sure conditions and treatment of the persons held in those institutions. Other than that, I work in a number of other countries, both in Europe and Asia, currently involved in Central Asia, also in Balkans, and I really hope that situation will improve so that in September I will implement my planned visit to Turkey, because this year and last year I had pleasure to visit your country a number of times, including Ankara, Eskişehir, Istanbul, Antalya. So, and we hope to do some more work because project is ongoing. As a member, former member of the CPT, I have worked in a number of countries, visiting prisons, and not only prisons. I have been in Turkish prisons not as a member of the CPT, but as an expert consultant. We visited, for example, Sincan prison complex in Ankara and a number of other places, somehow to get an understanding for the purpose of the project. I'm more or less familiar with legal framework related to the execution of sanctions in Turkey. Not everything, but something which was falling under the mandate of the project. And well, Turkey is a very big, interesting country, our neighbor, where we have very close ties, and always it's a pleasure to travel because it's also very easy to reach you. As to CPT, well, as I mentioned already, I was first elected to the committee back in 2005. I was the youngest member of the committee, and the convention, European Convention Against Torture and Inhuman and Degrading Treatment and Punishment, actually foresees the establishment of the committee, which is formed by the members. And each member state can have a member. Like Turkey has a member, Georgia has a member, UK has a member, all 47 member states can nominate the candidates. And the procedure is the following. Parliamentary delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe of the member state announces competition. Candidates can apply, they should fulfill certain criteria. And then a list of 3 candidates should be sent to the Council of Europe. Usually the list is reviewed by the Parliamentary Assembly Legal and Human Rights Committee, and then recommendation goes to the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe to elect a member. Usually one member is elected from 3. Not very recently, but it's also, well, rather recent development. There is a recommendation and requirement that on the list, at least one should be a woman from the candidates. Before, there was no such requirement. So, no, sure, it's done to achieve gender equality inside the committee. And after that, number of women in the committee, by the way, has increased. Yeah, maybe it's not yet 50-50, but close to that. So, well, my interest in human rights also comes from my education and background. I'm graduate of the Lund University, Raoul Wallenberg Institute on Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. After graduation, I came back home and continued my career with the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, in the capacity of the human rights advisor. And there was a call. They were looking for the candidates, the parliament. I applied, and then in 2005, I was lucky to be elected member of the CPT. And then also I managed to extend my mandate from 2 more terms. During this 12 years with the committee, I managed to have participated at least in the 30 visits done by the committee. I was heading the jurisprudence group of the committee, which is group which updates standards of the committee, and CPT is a lot about standards. And until now, I'm expert for the committee, although I'm not the member. After I left the committee end of 2017, I already managed to go to Lithuania and Bulgaria as an expert. And this year, if virus allows, I will have 2 more visits with the committee. So usually CPT is not announcing in advance the destination unless it's already known to the authorities, and it's one of your questions. So I will get back to that later. So CPT, as I mentioned, is a monitoring and standard setting body. And once one of my elder colleagues joked that if governments knew exactly what they were agreeing on, they would never sign the convention, because, well, the strengths of the CPT is that when you sign the convention and ratify it, after that the committee can come and visit your places for the deprivation of liberty, and you have to allow them to enter those places and provide all the conditions to work freely and independently. So it's free access to any facility, including island of Imrali or any other place. They should be able to talk in private to persons they are interested in. Usually we pick people we want to talk to, and we never ask authorities whom to talk to. We should have access to all documents and papers, information. We can interview anyone we want, and sure, then we are completely independent in compiling report and formulating recommendations submitted later to the member state. Number of the visits, sure, is not limited, and CPT can come to the country as many times as it wants. However, let's be realistic, it's not possible to visit one country, for example, on a monthly basis or whatever, although there are some countries which receive more visits than the others. Turkey is among those countries which receives more visits than some other countries. For example, CPT might go to Sweden once every 6 years, but they can come to Turkey sometimes maybe once a year or even twice a year if need be, because of some particular reasons. You know, the recent reason is migration also, and huge issues related to the migrants coming from the other parts of the globe and ending up in Turkey. So CPT has recently done a number of visits in that regard. Also, you know that CPT has visited a prisoner on the island of Imrali a number of times, and also has come for other visits. But again, CPT has periodic visits, which is usually the time frame is that once every 4 years, every country should receive a visit with some minor exceptions. However, ad hoc visits, which you also mentioned in your questions, are planned by the committee based on the needs. So usually committee is discussing where it needs to go. And actually the issue is that, yeah, committee then prioritizes particular places to be visited. Usually there is some reason to go, because you will just not do ad hoc visit without having a credible reason for doing that, because it's a lot of resources, financial and human resources, which have to be spent. And ad hoc visit is more difficult to be prepared because you have short terms, unlike periodic visit, which you know that it will take place and you are preparing it much in advance. Well, the visit usually is carried out by the delegation. The rule is that on the visit you have members and secretariat members who are permanent staff members of the Council of Europe. You also might need interpreters who are also members of the delegation, having same rights. And committee can also invite experts. Experts are people with some knowledge in particular areas who can be useful for the committee. And they can be also invited by the committee, and their services should be paid. So length of the visit depends on the country and complexity. You can't have a 2-day visit to Turkey, but you can have a short visit to Luxembourg or Liechtenstein, for example. But again, I mean, some big countries, and Turkey is one of the biggest countries as member of the Council of Europe with hundreds of institutions. Usually, even on a periodic visit, it's not possible to cover most part of it, but committee decides in advance which places it wants to visit. And some of them are notified, some of them are not. However, internal travel is also very important because you are not focused on Ankara or Istanbul or Izmir. You might go to some completely different places, not only to the big cities. And usually CPT goes to places where you have an institution. So we have been to many strange places, I have to tell you. Sometimes local people have never been there, but yeah, the cause is different. So committee, well, seat is in Strasbourg. It meets on the plenary meetings 3 times a year to adopt the reports and to decide on important elements. Committee has its own bureau, its president and 2 vice presidents elected by the committee, and also committee staff has executive secretary who runs the work of the secretariat in Strasbourg. So that's more or less briefly about the committee, but you can ask me some other questions if you need to know some insights. And one of the main things is that committee is bound by the rule of confidentiality, which also comes from the convention. It means that after the visit, for example, whenever a report is produced, a report will not become public unless there is an agreement with the host government. So that's why some of the reports on Turkey are not yet public, because Turkish government has never allowed their publication. Although in the past there would be less reports published, nowadays most of the reports get public. There are only very few countries who still are against of publication. One of them is Russia, and most of the reports are not made public. When it comes to committee, sure, it can come up with recommendations, and when it comes to implementation of recommendations, sure, committee monitors whether they implement it or not. You also use visits to check if your recommendations have been taken seriously. Well, different countries treat them differently. However, when committee gets very angry because of non-implementation, they might make a public statement. It's a measure of last resort under Article 10, paragraph 2 of the convention. I think Turkey was one of the countries where the committee has made in the past a public statement. There is also public statement on Azerbaijan, Russia, Greece, Belgium, and a number of other places. But if you check the webpage, and you can easily find those public statements, there are only very few in more than 30 years of committee's existence. So committee is very experienced, well resourced, very well respected, with lots of very good database, search engine, standards, tools, which are now all of them public. So to say, I would say when it comes to monitoring of the places of deprivation of liberty on international level, we have 2 main bodies. One is SPT, which is Subcommittee for the Prevention of Torture on the level of UN. And because of ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, the area of coverage is much broader for the SPT, because they can go to Latin America, to Africa, and to other regions. But CPT sure is limited only to the parties of the Convention, which is 47 member states which have acceded to the Convention, including Turkey. So, and then what else I can tell you about the committee? You have to let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Tugushi. My question is, you mentioned that according to your CPT visits to countries, which one did you affect mostly, positive or negatively?
Well, I have to tell you that, first of all, changes occurred in nearly all countries where CPT has been, to some extent. You can't say that there is a country where nothing has changed after the visit of the CPT, because After the visit of the CPT, you see changes in the legal framework quite often. You see changes in practice, you see changes in conditions of detention. You see, for example, new laws, renovated places, some kind of practices which are changing, some kind of investigations which take place. Although, sure, it's different. As I mentioned, countries sometimes treat CPT recommendations in a different way. You will be surprised to note, but the countries with less problems in that area are usually most, I would say, stubborn. For example, I've been to Finland, I've been to Sweden on a few visits, and for the last 10, 15 years, Komite is trying to achieve some changes there regarding their practice and legislation, but they do not consider it somehow, they don't agree to change those things. All the time we hear that they are having a working group, they are having a discussion, they are commissioning a study, and then you see that not much has been done. Well, actually, that's okay. These are very important things. However, they consider that some of the things are cultural for them and they don't need to make a change. I have to tell you that lack of money quite often is invoked by many governments for not making any changes, especially when it comes to improvement of conditions of detention. They just can tell you that, okay, we know our prison is bad, however, we have no money to have a new one, and what are you suggesting us to let people home? Okay. In many countries, they quite often again invoke lack of finances when it comes to the prison staff or police or whatever. They say that they can't hire people, they can't pay them. For example, they can't have enough doctors because they can't pay them and they go to work abroad. They don't want to work in the prison or in the psychiatric hospital. And there are many challenges. However, if you check reports from the countries which have implemented the most of the committee's recommendations, you will see that there is not much CPT can tell them. It's basically many countries from the Western Europe, including, I would say, Nordic countries, for example, again, Norway, Sweden, Finland. Well, you will see also a very critical report on Denmark, recent one, and there was a lot of publicity given to this report. You will see, for example, that, well, Germany is doing quite well when it comes to the prison system, for example, but they also have problems. I will never manage to tell you a country where CPT cannot find something to criticize, because that's not happening in the reality. Although the gravity of the problems is in place. For example, in some countries, torture is still a systemic issue. In some countries, it's not. But even regarding that, CPT has achieved a lot of progress in a number of countries where situation has improved when it comes to application of torture and inhuman and degrading treatment. I just don't want now to list particular countries. However, believe me, with the CPT, and not only CPT, also including European Court of Human Rights and other monitoring mechanisms, things have improved. At least they got worse in some areas, but not when it comes to torture. However, some black spots still remain. And when you come, you still find, for example, that police is systematically torturing people.
Thank you, Mr. Tugushi.
I can move on now. The COVID-19 crisis affect the reporting process of CPT, and if did, how reports were affected, and for the following visits, there will be any chances due to the coronavirus?
Well, yeah, you are right. COVID-19 has affected not just CPT, but everything and everyone, I guess. And sure, it has largely interrupted the work of the committee as well. Personally, it has also affected me because I was supposed to be on a visit with the CPT to Finland, end of March, beginning of April, and visit has not taken the place. Now this visit is postponed. Maybe it will still take the place. If not, it will be moved further. Depends how much we will be allowed to work. Well, now you have two challenges. One is whether CPT and its members, including Secretariat, can safely work. And another is whether you can work in the host country when you come there. And there are certain risks not to bring virus into the prison, not to get infected yourself, and to be able to move. For example, imagine you come to a country like Turkey or Ukraine and you can't travel internally because airport is not working. And taking a car, for example, from Ankara to Trabzon, you will need like a day to get there and then back. So you will not be able to work. So again, there are a few issues: epidemiological concerns, logistics, which becomes a huge issue. I have a CPT visit beginning of August. Now I'm trying to figure out how to reach the place, the capital of one of the member states, because Turkish Airlines now is not operating flights to Georgia. I was thinking of traveling to Trabzon by car and maybe flying from there. Although the amount of flights, it's very limited because I am basically using Turkish Airlines to get anywhere, and now it's not that easy. So, but again, the CPT came to a conclusion after a number of meetings where I was also invited that nobody will tolerate CPT sitting at home. It should work. And I think that CPT is now resuming its operation, and they will do some short visits in the beginning. And as of August, we will try to get back close to normal, but never to normal. Because, for example, if you had a planned visit to Russia, you will not go there because the epidemiological situation is very bad, unless it improves. So there will be adjustments to the visiting program. It will never look the same until the situation gets completely to normal. However, there will be more resources needed. You will need a lot of equipment to be carried, including masks, including special gowns, including sanitizers, which we always have, by the way. Sanitizer is not something new to me because I would usually use it after visiting a prison or any other institution, police or psychiatry or social care. However, now, yeah, things have changed and we have to develop guidelines, protocols. For example, people above certain age are recommended not to go on a visit. People with underlying conditions who have some health issues, it can be cancer, it can be diabetes, it can be something else, which can be a bigger problem than COVID itself, are recommended to stay. Nobody can be forced in general to go for the visit. And there might be some adjustments. For example, we might avoid now social care and houses for elderly, which we would sometimes visit because you know that there was a high mortality in those places and very high risk. So I would say that for a body which has to move and travel, COVID is big problem. If CPT was like some other bodies which never go to the place, especially to the institutions which need to be COVID-free, well, it's an issue. Now the things are difficult. It's about testing, it's about travel, it's about equipment, it's about how you should work. Sometimes at the end of the interviewing, for example, should you sit still nearby the person whom you are interviewing? Should you wear a mask? Should there be a glass partition between the interviewed person and you? Will you do still high-level talks like in the past, go to the Ministry of Justice, for example, with whole delegation and sit there with local authorities, or into the Ministry of Interior? And then, sure, let's agree on one thing, CPT cannot work online. You can't have a Zoom conference with prisoners asking them how they are treated. You have to go there. However, CPT will slowly resume, but if epidemiological situation will get worse again, it might have to slow down again. So that's what is in the pipeline. Unfortunately, I'm unable to disclose all the details, and I don't know all those details any longer. I'm not a member, I'm an expert, but I know where I am supposed to go. However, again, everything is on a standby because you plan something, you never know whether you will do it or you will not. And some visits might be shorter than usual because of situation.
Thank you. My
Thank you.
question is, what are your recommendations to young lawyers who want to work in the field of execution law and human rights law?
Well, first of all, you should have a good knowledge what you are doing, and I see that you are very motivated and committed. When it comes to execution of criminal sanctions, let's say so, yeah, we are somehow, although CPT mandate covers all places of deprivation of liberty, it looks like we speak more about prisons. Yeah, that's the most popular topic usually. Well, first of all, I mean, I think that you can work in number of directions. Sometimes people are themselves in charge of executing criminal sanctions. They end up as directors of prisons, I don't know, ministers of justice, heads of the departments. You might be a prison staff member or any other specialist, or sometimes people decide to monitor how others are working. For example, to do more human rights work and go to the prison and check how they are working. When I was meeting with the members of the civil monitoring boards who visit prisons in Turkey, they were always saying that they usually receive a training in execution law, and that's what they do. And then we told them, yes, but you also should receive training in human rights, etc. Because, well, a good lawyer who works in the area is who knows the law, but also has idea how to improve the law. Also to see how the laws work in practice. In my experience with the CPT, I have seen many, many countries with perfect legal framework when it never worked in practice. You have a very nice law with nice texts and some good guarantees and requirements. However, in practice, this law is not working. You see that it's just not implemented. For example, all laws say that torture is inadmissible. People should be treated humanly. You come and you see that people are mistreated. You see in the law that people should be provided healthcare in the prison, but you see that there is no doctor, nothing, and prisoners have no money to treat themselves. You see that law says all prisoners should be provided decent conditions of detention, and then you come and you see an overcrowded cell for 2 people with 10 people sleeping in turns on the floor, I don't know, on the rooftop, whatever. So the law says that, for example, everybody should have access to outdoor exercise, to activities, and there's nothing happening. People are locked up in their cells 24/7. It says that they should be provided hot shower at least once a week, and you see that there is no water supply in the prison, clean sanitation, whatever, access to outside, well, telephone calls, and you see there is no telephone. I'm just giving you practical examples. So the good thing is that when you learn how the law works, you also to make sure it works in practice and to achieve that. So there are many things people like you should care about. It's not only about adopting a good law and execution of criminal sanctions, it's also to make sure that it's compliant with human rights standards and it's applied in practice. And the main thing is that if the law is violated, then there should be responsibility for that and there should be no impunity. That's the main element. So that's some areas which should be paid attention. And also one of the good things is that when you know not only domestic legislation, but also international standards and practice, then you are quite well able to strike a balance, because you are law students, you know that, for example, the European Court of Human Rights allows certain margin of appreciation to the member states when they can legislate and establish their own rules and somehow to justify why they need that. But there is also a principle of proportionality, principle of pursuing legal aim, and whenever you have some restrictions in place, etc., they should be proportionate. For example, if you decide to isolate a prisoner for long and forcing him to stay alone in his cell and maybe in the prison, then you should justify and you should prove that it's proportionate. If not, then you have to change the practice.
Thank you.
Sir, you said
Yes.
that the committee's visits may be periodic or ad hoc. Could we say that ad hoc visits are really a surprise to the relevant state, or do you have any obligation to inform the state before the visit?
Very good question, thank you. Well, you can't just pop up in the airport telling the government, hello, I came to visit you. That never happens like this, it's impossible. So, okay, I'll tell you briefly. If periodic visit is notified usually no later than 1 month in advance, ad hoc visit usually can be notified, okay, 1-2 weeks in advance, so in shorter terms. But periodic visit is something government knows. For example, CPT publishes the list of the periodic visit in the beginning of the year. It says that in 2020, I will go, for example, to Luxembourg, to Turkey, to Armenia, to Azerbaijan, to Netherlands, whatever. Usually 10 countries or 8 are published, and government whole year expects you to visit. Usually, sure, it's either in the first half of the year or in the second, but you know that they're gonna come. However, when it comes to ad hoc, sure, there is no list of possible ad hoc visits. For example, there are some disturbances in the country. Police dispersed the rally. It detained hundreds of people. There were injuries. CPT might decide to go. Something like this happened in Albania a while ago. There was a prison scandal in Georgia, and CPT came there after a month just to check what was going on. It might be a massive influx of migrants, for example, in Greece, or they might cross the border from Turkey to Greece, and CPT might decide immediately they have to travel, but it will take a while to prepare the visit. You have to prepare logistics, to buy the tickets, to find the members, experts, interpreters, and then you have to tell the government, I'm coming. So that's how it works. But usually there are some reasonable terms and reasonable time given to the authorities also to prepare your visit. They have to provide you conditions to work. They have to provide you credentials, the document which you show to the authorities when you come to the place. But again, these visits are not notified 1 hour in advance, usually a few days, and then they know that you are coming. However, during ad hoc visit, you might decide not to notify any place you're going to visit, but authorities are quite smart. They sometimes understand where you will go. So in some countries, there are places which they know CPT will never avoid going there. Like it can be main remand prison in the capital or main police station in the capital, some other places, or sometimes security service, security police might have only one place for detention and they know that CPT most probably will go there. But while periodic visits include most of the places, you go to police, to prisons, to psychiatry, to social care, migration, ad hoc visits can be very focused. You might do an ad hoc visit visiting only migration or psychiatry or police and policial treatment and pop up in the remand prison. However, I mean, yeah, unfortunately, it's impossible to have a visit like a surprise visit. Usually you have to tell government at least few days in advance.
Thank you for your answer, sir.
So, more questions?
I think we are all done with the questions.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, I forgot to unmute. I think we finished them all. So we're happy to do an interview with you. If you have anything to add, we can.
Well, I'm very happy to have this discussion with you, and many thanks for, I would say, the questions sometimes many governments fail to formulate like this. They are all, I would say, very, not only interesting, but also the questions which all of them make sense. And you raise some topics which can be really interesting to know when it comes to the modalities of the work of the committee. Thanks for providing me this opportunity. I love talking to students. I was lecturing for many years myself, human rights law, but then considering that I was traveling all the time, I gave up because it kept students unhappy that I was always postponing my classes and exams. However, I mean, in the future, if you need anything, you know my contacts, you can just email me. You don't need Duygu any longer to somehow act as an intermediary. And well, let me wish you good luck and also return to the normal working and educational process, because being a student, I think the nicest thing when you can spend time in university, in the garden of the university building, in the cafe, even in the library sometimes, and also on an interesting lecture. So I know that this online version of education cannot substitute normal life, and I wish to all of us to be back to normal life, and let me wish you good health.
Thank you for your great wishes.
More than welcome, and have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Keep safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.